Hi, everyone. There's something about the way certain absences don't actually feel like absences. You know what I mean. You've felt it. That strange sensation where someone isn't speaking to you, isn't reaching out, isn't texting, isn't calling, and yet they've never felt closer. It doesn't make logical sense. You've probably tried to explain it to yourself a dozen times, told yourself that silence is silence, that no contact means no contact, that if someone wanted to reach out, they would, but that's not what your body has been telling you, is it? Your body has been telling you something else entirely. Because here's the thing about no contact. The version of it that's been living in your chest, pressing against your ribs at 2 a.m., making certain songs feel unbearable and certain silences feel loud. It's not permanent. It was never going to be permanent. And somewhere underneath all the logic, all the pride, all the carefully constructed walls you've built to protect yourself, you've known that too. Let me ask you something. When you think about this person, the one you're not speaking to, the one who's been reduced to a name you barely say out loud anymore, what do you actually feel? Not what you tell your friends, not what you post, not what you've decided you should feel, but in the quiet moments, in the shower, in the car before you turn on the engine, in the half second between sleep and waking when your guard hasn't gotten dressed yet. What do you actually feel? Because if you're honest, really honest, it's not relief, is it? It's not peace. It's not the clean freedom you were promised when someone told you that no contact would heal everything. It's something else, something heavier, something that feels less like a closed door and more like a room you're standing outside of with your ear pressed to the wood, waiting. And you've been waiting for a while now, longer than you expected to, longer than you'll admit to anyone who asks. But you're still waiting, and that waiting, that persistent, quiet, almost embarrassing waiting, is not weakness, it's information. There's a particular kind of tension that builds inside a person when something important is left unfinished. Not the tension of a to-do list, not the tension of a deadline, the other kind, the kind that lives in the space between what was said and what wasn't, the kind that hums underneath every silence, every glance away, every conversation that ended 3 sentences too early. You've been carrying that tension, maybe for weeks, maybe for months, maybe longer than you want to calculate. And you've been telling yourself that it will fade, that time heals, that eventually the weight will lift and you'll wake up one morning and realize you don't care anymore. But that morning hasn't come, has it? Mm. And there's a reason for that. Not a magical reason, not a cosmic reason, a human reason, a real one. The reason the tension hasn't faded is because it's not one sided. You're not the only one carrying it. And somewhere in a different room, in a different city, in a different version of silence, someone else has been feeling the exact same weight. The difference is they don't know how to reach out first, or maybe they do and they're scared. Or maybe they've tried and you didn't notice. Or maybe they're waiting for the exact same signal you're waiting for. And neither of you has blinked yet, but someone is about to. Here's what no one tells you about no contact. It's not a law of physics. It's not a permanent state of matter. It's a choice that someone made, usually out of pain, usually out of confusion, usually out of not knowing what else to do. And choices can be unmade, not easily, not without risk, not without the terrifying possibility of getting hurt again, but they can be unmade. And someone, maybe the person you're thinking of, maybe someone else entirely, has been standing at the edge of unmaking that choice for a while now. You've felt it, haven't you? In the way certain notifications make your heart jump, in the way you've been checking your phone differently, in the way you've been leaving your ringer on when you used to keep it silent. You're not imagining that shift. You're responding to something real, something that's been building pressure behind the scenes of your life, in the spaces you don't usually examine, in the hours you don't usually account for. There's a particular kind of silence that happens right before someone breaks their own rule. You've seen it before, maybe not in this situation, but in others. That strange, stretched moment where someone has clearly been thinking about something for days, and then suddenly, without warning, they speak, or they text, or they call. And the call comes at an hour that doesn't make sense, or the message arrives with a tone that doesn't match the history, or the voice on the other end sounds different, smaller, or larger, or shakier than you remember. That's what's been gathering around the edges of your no contact situation. Not a guarantee, not a prediction, but a pressure. A pressure that has been looking for an exit. And exits, even small ones, have a way of appearing when you least expect them. You might have noticed that certain people have been looking at you differently lately. Not the person you're in no contact with, but others, friends, coworkers. People who don't know the full story, but seem to sense that something is different about you. They hold your gaze a beat too long. They ask how you're doing in a tone that suggests they already know the answer isn't. Fine. They mention the person's name carefully, like they're testing whether the ground will shake. And maybe you've dismissed this, told yourself you're being paranoid, told yourself that people don't notice as much as you think they do. But here's what's actually happening. The tension you've been carrying has become visible, not because you're weak, but because tension, real tension, the kind that lives in the body, always becomes visible eventually. It shows up in your voice, in your posture, in the way you hesitate before answering certain questions. And other people, even people who aren't particularly observant, can feel it. And some of them have been waiting to see what you'll do, not out of judgment, out of recognition, because they've been there too. They've carried their own version of this weight. And they know, they know that no contact doesn't always mean done. Sometimes it just means paused. And pauses end. There's something you've been avoiding saying to yourself. I can feel it in the way you're listening right now, the slight tilt of your attention, the way you're leaning in but also holding back, the part of you that wants to click away but hasn't. Here's what you've been avoiding. You don't actually want the no contact to continue. Not really. Not in the quiet truth of your chest. You've been telling yourself that you're fine with it, that you've moved on, that you don't care who reaches out first because you're not waiting anymore. But you are waiting, and the waiting has become its own kind of contact. Think about it. How many times have you rehearsed what you would say if they reached out? How many times have you imagined the notification, the ringtone, the name appearing on your screen? How many times have you caught yourself glancing at your phone, not because you're expecting anyone else, but because you're expecting them? That's not moving on. That's holding space. And holding space is not the same as healing. But here's what no one tells you about holding space: it also keeps the connection alive. Not in a healthy way, maybe, not in a way that anyone would recommend, but alive nonetheless. And something that's alive can change. Let me describe a feeling to you. You've had it before, maybe last week, maybe last night, maybe this morning. It's the feeling of picking up your phone with no new notifications, but instead of putting it down immediately, you hold it, you stare at the screen, you open the messaging app, you scroll to their name, and you just look. You don't type anything, you don't call, you just look at the evidence that they exist. The last message, the old conversation, the profile picture that might have changed or might not have. And in that moment, something passes through you. Not hope, exactly. Not longing, exactly. Something in between. Something that doesn't have a name. That's the space where the break is going to happen. Not in a dramatic confrontation, not in a tearful confession, in that quiet, unnamed space where you finally admit that you're still connected. And once you admit that, once you stop pretending that the silence has erased everything, something shifts. The pressure changes, the weighting changes, you change. Because the person who's about to break the no contact, whether it's them or whether it's you, isn't going to do it from a place of weakness. They're going to do it from a place of recognition. The recognition that some threads don't actually break when you cut them, they just go underground. And underground threads have a way of surfacing. You might be wondering why this feels so specific to you, why the words seem to be landing in places you didn't know were still tender, why your throat has tightened slightly, or your chest has gotten warmer, or your breathing has changed without your permission. Here's why: because you're not the only one who's been carrying this. The person you're in no contact with, the one who's been silent, the one who's been absent, the one who's been reduced to a ghost in your daily life, they've been carrying it too. And carrying something heavy for this long, it changes a person, it softens them, it cracks open the places where pride used to live. And when someone is cracked open even slightly, they do things they said they would never do. They reach out when they said they wouldn't. They call when they promised to stay silent. They break their own rules because the weight of the silence has become heavier than the weight of their fear. That's what's been building. That's what you've been sensing. That's why the air has felt different lately. Here's what I want you to notice: not what you think, not what you hope, but what you actually feel when you imagine the contact breaking. When you imagine the notification, the one you've been half waiting for, half dreading. When you imagine their name on your screen. When you imagine opening the message and seeing words from them for the first time in days or weeks or months. What's the first feeling? Not the second feeling, not the feeling you think you should have. The first one, the one that arrives before you can stop it. Uh, for some of you, it's relief. For some of you, it's fear. For some of you, it's something closer to anger. Anger that they waited this long, that they made you wait, that they're only reaching out now after all the silence. And here's the thing: all of those feelings are valid, all of them are real, And none of them mean you should ignore the call when it comes. Because the call, the unexpected reaching out, it's not about whether you're ready. It's about whether you're willing to stop pretending. Stop pretending the silence doesn't hurt. Stop pretending you don't care who reaches out first. Stop pretending that no contact has been good for you when something in your chest has been aching this whole time. There's a version of this story where the no contact continues, where the silence stretches into weeks, into months, into years, where you both become so skilled at not reaching out that eventually you forget how that version exists. It's real. And maybe for some situations it's even necessary, but that's not the version you're in, and you know that. You've known it for a while. That's why you're still here. That's why you didn't scroll past. That's why something in you recognized the title before you even finished reading it. You're in the version where something breaks, not because you're weak, because silence, prolonged, intentional, heavy silence is not sustainable. It was never designed to be. Humans weren't built for this kind of quiet. We were built for rupture and repair, for breaking and mending, for walking away and coming back. And someone, maybe them, maybe you, is about to come back. Let me tell you something about the person on the other side of this silence, the one you've been thinking about, the one whose name you almost said out loud when you started listening to this. They've been replaying things too. Not the same things you've been replaying, but their own version, their own highlight reel of moments they miss, their own collection of things they wish they had said differently, their own private inventory of all the ways they contributed to the distance. And they've been sitting with that inventory late at night, in the car, in the moments when their guard was down and the truth slipped through. And that truth, the one they've been avoiding, is simple. They don't want the silence to be permanent either. They just didn't know how to say it. They still might not know, but knowing how isn't the same as wanting to. And the wanting has been growing. Here's where most scripts would give you a timeline. They'd tell you when the call is coming. They'd describe exactly what it will sound like. They'd prepare you for every word, every pause, every shaky exhale on the other end of the line. But I'm not going to do that. Because the call, when it comes, isn't going to follow a script. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be imperfect. It's going to arrive at a strange hour in a strange form with words that don't quite capture what either of you actually feels. And that's okay. That's more than okay. That's real. The only thing I can tell you with any certainty is this: the no contact is ending, not because of magic, not because of fate, because pressure sustained, unacknowledged, quietly desperate pressure always finds a release. And the release is coming. Um, you've been holding your breath without realizing it, not dramatically, not obviously, but in the background of your days, in the spaces between tasks, between conversations, between the version of yourself you show the world and the version that exists when no one is looking. You've been holding the possibility that they might reach out, holding the fear that they won't, holding the memory of what it felt like before everything went quiet, holding the question of whether you would even respond if they did. And holding all of that, it's exhausting. Even if you've stopped noticing the exhaustion, even if you've gotten used to the weight, But here's what happens when something you've been holding finally gets released. You don't feel relief at first. You feel strange, disoriented, like you've forgotten how to stand without the weight. That's normal. That's what speechlessness feels like. Not emptiness, not confusion, the body catching up to a change that hasn't fully registered yet. And that's what's waiting for you. Not a perfect reconciliation, not a fairy tale ending, a moment, maybe brief, maybe longer, where the silence finally breaks, and in that moment, you're not going to know what to say. Not because you're unprepared, because you're going to realize in real time that you've been waiting for this longer than you admitted to yourself. And the realization, it's going to leave you speechless. And there's something you need to hear, something that might be hard to accept, but something that will also, in a strange way, set you free. The no contact situation you've been in, the silence, the distance, the ache. It wasn't a waste of time. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pause that gave you both time to feel the absence. And absence, real absence, teaches you things that presence never could. It teaches you what you actually miss, not the idea of them, not the convenience of them, but them, the specific, flawed, complicated, irreplaceable them. And if the silence has taught you that you miss them, not just the attention, not just the habit, but them, then the silence served its purpose. And now it's time for something else. The call that's coming, the unexpected reaching out, it might not look like a call. It might be a text. It might be a voice message left in the middle of the night. It might be a shared post, a tagged memory, a like on something old that makes your heart stop for half a second. But it will be unmistakable because you'll feel it before you see it. The same way you've been feeling the tension building, the same way you've known somewhere underneath everything that the silence couldn't last. You'll feel it and you'll know, here's what I want you to remember when it happens. You don't have to respond immediately. You don't have to have the perfect words. You don't have to know whether this is a beginning, an ending, or something in between. You just have to stop pretending. Stop pretending you don't feel it. Stop pretending the silence hasn't been heavy. Stop pretending that some part of you, the part you don't show anyone, hasn't been waiting for this moment since the moment the no contact began. Stop pretending and let yourself be speechless. Because speechlessness, real speechlessness, the kind that comes when something true finally surfaces, that's not emptiness, that's recognition. That's the part of you that's always known that the no contact was temporary. That's the part of you that's been holding the thread, even when you pretended to let go. And now the thread is moving. The call is coming. Or maybe it's already here and you're not ready and you never could have been. And that's exactly why it's going to leave you speechless. Inhale, exhale. Nothing is resolved. Nothing is finished. But the no contact, it's ending. And you can feel it